the sponsor of. And we spent a week together in Israel, Rand with all of us, and it was a great chance to get to know him better. Again, what I found from Rand was a thirst for knowledge and a willingness, and first of all, an intellectual capability to hear all the data, hear new information, and incorporate it, and then start to refine some of his positions as he gained more information. We had a Sabbath dinner for him in the basement of the Plaza Hotel, and we had 11 boys from the Mir Yeshiva there, and every 5 or 10 minutes they would start to sing a song. We start to dance around the table, and so when we got to Rand, he was wearing this little crumpled yarmulke, and I said, stand up. So he figured if I'm telling him to do it, it must be kosher. So he stands up, and I took his hand. I guess he's not used to dancing with men hand in hand in Kentucky, but anyway, by like the 5th dance, I had my arm around him on one side, another boy on the other side, and they were dancing around. He's enjoying it, and I whispered in his ear, "If only your father could see you now." I love Rand Paul. He's a tremendous sport. He's a good person. He's honest. Then after that visit, he came to Lakewood, to my home, and he walked to the yeshiva, BMG, and he was firing questions off. He has this thirst for knowledge, new things he's not seen before. He wants to learn about them, and he's a really good person and just a good friend. So with no further ado, I want to introduce my friend, Rand Paul.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Rabbi Nate. I always joke that Rabbi Nate is either my rabbi or my security, one of the two. Rabbi Nate's been great at introducing us around the country. He's introduced us probably in 10 different cities to Orthodox Jews and leaders in their community, and we've been very privileged to be able to meet people around the country through Rabbi Nate. We had a great time in Israel with Dr. Roberts, and I want to thank him for sponsoring that trip and for doing what he does, not only for his community, but also, I think, for relations, both between your community and the rest of the United States and the world, really. And I want to thank Dr. Roberts for that. When I think of the things that I've learned about your faith and where your faith intersects with my faith, one of the things I think about, and one of the things that first comes to mind, is tradition. And with tradition comes so many things. One is loyalty, and I remember when we were at the Shabbat, Dr. Roberts talked about loyalty, and I think that's a very important trait. One of the things about freedom, we want to be free, and we want to live in a free country, is that I think freedom requires tradition. The same way you could say liberty requires virtue. George Washington talked about this when he said that a democracy requires a virtuous people. I think that's something we can all agree. Don Devine is a favorite author of mine, and he wrote a book called America's Way Back, and in it he said that freedom needs tradition for law and order, for inspiration. But tradition needs freedom to escape stagnation, coercion, decline. And so it's a mixed bag. We say we want to be free, but do we want to be free to do anything? Do we want a society where people do and say anything, or do we want a society that is bounded by virtue, bounded by tradition? There's a theologian by the name of Os Guinness, and he says that the only kind of restraint that's consistent with freedom is self-restraint. I say all this to say that you have to have religion. You need a religious backbone for a culture or for a civilization. And when I think of the difference between a civilization like ours that has it and some civilizations that don't, there's a very different outcome. Think of the American Revolution versus the French Revolution. In the American Revolution, we threw off the yoke of the king, but we didn't throw off tradition. We kept 800 years of common law history. We kept the tradition of elected government that we had for, really, a lot of people don't realize, for 150 years before our revolution, we had colonial government. We had all of these things. Then you think of the French Revolution, where they throw off the yoke of the king, but with that they throw off religion too, because religion and the king were the same thing. So I think what binds us together, whether we're Jewish or Christian or whatever our background is the belief that a stabilizing force for civilization, a stabilizing force for our country, is our traditions. When I was in Israel, we went to the Shabbat dinner. I love just sort of the traditions. And a lot of the traditions aren't necessarily our traditions, but You know, I see things, and I asked Dr. Roberts about like Schindler's List, placing a rock on the gravesite, the tradition of sitting Shiva, things like that that are important, the tradition of respecting our parents, respecting our elders, and that we gain knowledge from our elders. And I think we see all of these things that are being lost. Now, not everybody's going to be strong enough to keep your traditions, and you do. You keep your traditions, and sometimes they're a separate tradition, but you're keeping them and fighting against the onslaught of a modernism that is losing these traditions. And I think that we would all be well to understand how important it is that we try to maintain what are these civilizing forces of our culture. And I think in that we are all together in, and I'm very happy to be here today. And I want to thank Dr. Roberts again for inviting me. Thank you. And with that, I was just going to say we can do questions.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We get more specific. I know it's maybe a little less specific than people might want.
The Senator's been kind enough to say he will take questions. First question is an old friend who spent the Shabbos meal with you. Will you call upon the editor of the Yaakov Ne'eman and open
Senator, thank you for coming here to meet us, to listen to us, and to answer our questions. You spoke about the Shabbos, and Dr. Rabbi spoke about the Shabbos. I was at that Shabbos, and since we're in a closed group here and there's no media, when Rabbi Nate asked me to join the Shabbos, I said, Paul, are you crazy? He's an anti-Semite. Didn't you read about him? It's the elephant in the room, so I'm bringing it up. And I came to know you that Shabbos, and I saw that you're a decent, really a genuine, nice, intelligent, loving person, and that everything that I had read about you until that Shabbos was a lie. It was not true. And I thought that you could really win. And I told Nate I'm going to support this guy. And we interviewed you like 4 times. And they said, why? Like, he wasn't really convinced. I said, because Hillary is a robot. She's so programmed. She's not a human being. This guy is a thinking person. He's a guy that thinks on his feet, and he learns, and he grows, and he's not nuanced, and he's not blow-dried. So, my question, I'm leading up to a question. The question is
Good so far, though.
that they're still writing that stuff that they were writing about you. Politico had an article. I didn't send it to Nick. I didn't want to hurt him. But I'm sure you saw it. They had an article about the Republican Jewish thing they had over the weekend, over Shabbos, and you weren't there. And they made a big deal about it. And they sort of said, Rand Paul, well, you know, he doesn't count. The Jews don't like him. And I was reading that. I said, that's a lie. That's not true. And they were saying how you're not supportive of Israel. I said, that's not true. That's a lie. So, everything they write about you is really not true. And the reason they do that is because your position towards Israel and your position towards foreign aid, it's not a blow-dried, poll-tested position. It's a position that you arrived at through thinking, through thought, through examining the history, and through seeing what's happening now. So the question is, how do you overcome that? How do you get your position in today's media culture, where everything has to be got down into 5 seconds, and that has to be poll tested throughout the country? How do you explain your position in a way that they will stop writing that you're an anti-Semite?
You know, I think it's a good question. What are perceptions and where are perceptions? And so, for example, we asked the question recently in New Hampshire and in Iowa, 2 states that happen to be important, you know, in the nominating process. We asked Republicans what they thought my position was on Israel, pro or con or in between. And really, we don't see it as much of a problem as it might have been 2 or 3 years ago before people knew me. All I can do is keep saying what I believe in, and then ultimately, hopefully, people come to the truth. Also, people have to recognize that people who say things in the media that are your competitors will say things that sometimes aren't true in order to gain advantage. But I think we've made great progress.
It does create a perception, and I'm not your campaign director, but you really have to do something to change that perception.
We're trying, and I mean, we've tried in not just a short period of time with one sort of public statement. We've tried for a long period of time. Like I said, Rabbi Nate's had us meet folks in probably 10 different cities. And so we keep trying. We meet with delegations who come to Washington as well. And I think over time, the thing is it's complicated. It's complicated even within the Jewish community. And I'll give you an example. I put forward a bill that's called the Stand With Israel Act, and it says that we shouldn't give money to the Palestinian Authority that's allied with Hamas, because indirectly we're funding perhaps missiles that are being launched against Israel. And AIPAC doesn't support me on the bill. In fact, they lobby against me on the bill. So I don't remember, Rich or somebody said something about, what is it? There's a saying about 2 Jews, 3 opinions, or 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I don't know. But anyway, we're not all the same. I mean, every Jewish person doesn't have the same thought. Every American doesn't have the same thought. We have some disagreement. But the thing is that by putting that forward, I think people know where I am. I'm not
Where
giving
are
money
you?
to the
Could you
Palestinian
sum it up
Authority.
for,
But it's,
where are you on Israel?
I think Israel is one of our best allies and best friends around the world. They're the only democracy in the Middle East, and I'm very supportive of. I've voted for Iron Dome. I've voted for